Good morning. Thank you for joining. We'll be allowing a few more minutes for participants to join, and we will be getting started at 11 a.m. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining. We will be starting the meeting at 11. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining. We'll be starting momentarily. Good morning, everyone. Welcome. I would like to note that I do see some AI note takers in the room, and we are not going to have those in the room. So we will be removing them, just so you all know. Hey. Okay, thank you. I think we will be getting started now. So good morning. My name is Mia Shappy with Kearns and West, and I'll be facilitating today's meeting. We thank you for joining this public workshop for the proposed designation of the Kern County Subbasin as a probationary basin. Today's workshop will be provided in Spanish, Punjabi, and English. If you need to switch your language settings to Spanish or Punjabi, please click on the interpretation globe icon at the bottom of your Zoom window. From there, a menu will pop up offering Spanish, Punjabi, or English. If you select Spanish or Punjabi, please click Mute Original Audio so you only hear the Spanish or Punjabi translation. We'll now hand it over to Giselle Franco for Spanish interpretation. Thank you. I will now hand it over to Gurpreet Singh for Punjabi interpretation. Okay. Thank you, Gurpreet. All right. Okay, the presentation slides are also in English, Spanish, and Punjabi. To display the presentation in your preferred language, click on, at the top of the screen, there are options. English slides, Presentación en Español, and Punjabi slides. Please click on your preferred slide at the top of the screen. If you have any questions regarding technical issues, please reach out to Jackson Gould via chat, and he'll either answer or forward the question to the appropriate staff member or interpreter. If you're joining from your smartphone, you should be able to click on More and follow the same steps for the interpretation. As we work our way through the workshop presentations, please keep in mind that because we are offering the workshops in 3 languages, there may be pauses throughout to allow for interpreters to complete a slide before we can advance. We very much appreciate your patience during these brief pauses. To understand who we have with us today, we have provided a short 3-question participation poll in the chat. There's both an English, Spanish, and Punjabi version of the poll, so we encourage you all and thank you to take a few minutes to follow those links and fill out the surveys. Thank you. Okay, and on to community guidelines. We're encouraging the following community guidelines today. Please rename yourself and provide affiliation if it applies. You can do so by clicking on the three dots on your name tile, and click rename. Engage respectfully and avoid personal attacks verbally or in the chat. Use chat to communicate comments and or questions to speakers. Please use the raise hand function and wait until the facilitator calls on you to speak. Please remain muted when not speaking. And during the comment portion, we will go in order of hands raised and may provide a time limit if there are several people who would like to comment. Okay. For online participants, please rename yourself with your affiliation if applicable, and you can do this by clicking on the three dots on the top right of your square and select Rename. The presentation and QA portions of this meeting will be recorded, but the comment period will not be. We will be recording notes for the entire meeting. Throughout the presentation, you can use the chat to send comments and questions to the speakers. Even if we are not able to cover all of them, we will make sure they make it to board staff. During the comment period, you will be able to mute or unmute yourself using the mic icon, as well as turn off and off your video by clicking the camera icon on the bottom left of the Zoom bar. For phone participants, please use the raise hand by pressing *9 on your keypad and unmute and mute yourself by pressing *6 on your keypad. Great. The Q&A will be for clarifying questions regarding content you learned about during the state intervention process presentation. This will allow us enough time to prioritize the comment portion of the call. If we are unable to answer your question in our efforts to prioritize public comments, please include your email address with your question in the chat if you'd like staff to follow up. We ask that you use the raise hand function by clicking the reactions button, which may look like either a heart or a smiley face icon in the Zoom bar. We may need to put a time limit on comments depending on how many people are with us today. I'll start by calling on folks in the order I see your Zoom hand, and we'll list off the names of person who are on deck. So you're ready to go off mute when a commenter has finished. You will also be able to send in written comments after the workshop, and we'll provide more information on that later. Today's meeting objectives are to provide an opportunity for public to learn about the draft staff report, which describes the actions staff recommend the State Water Board should take for the proposed designation of the Kern County Subbasin as a probationary basin. To provide an opportunity for the public to interact with the State Water Resources Control Board staff and raise their questions and concerns. And then third, to provide an opportunity for the public to provide verbal and written comments on the draft recommendation. Okay, so today's agenda, we'll be starting with opening remarks from State Water Board Chair Joaquin Esquivel. We'll move into a presentation from the State Board that includes a background on groundwater and Kern County Subbasin, an overview of the state intervention process under SGMA, plan issues described in the staff report, proposed requirements for groundwater extractors. We'll then move on to a public question and answer portion on the probationary hearing process. And then we will open up the floor for comments that will include a presentation from the Kern County Groundwater Sustainability Agencies. And then we'll discuss next steps. I'd now like to invite Chair Esquivel to provide some opening remarks.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate it, Mia. And thanks to the entire crew that's making today's meeting open, transparent, and accessible with translation services. It's really appreciated. So I am Joaquin Esquivel. I have the honor of being the chair of the State Water Resources Control Board. I'm actually joined today as well by Vice Chair Doreen Diadamo, board members Sean McGuire, Laurel Firestone, and Nicole Morgan. So thank them for their time here then today. And thank you all. I know things are incredibly busy out there, and so really appreciate you all taking the time today to be able to provide feedback to the board, provide your perspectives on this process that we're all in the middle of, which is implementation of the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act. Today's discussion, as you know, will be focused here on the Kern Subbasin. I want to appreciate that some of you may have been tracking development of your groundwater sustainability agencies in Kern, the groundwater sustainability plans, and others may be coming to this discussion new. We're trying our best to set in a level playing field here in order for folks to be able to come in the door as they are and be able to provide us, again, your perspectives and information here at this workshop. This virtual workshop is also being accompanied by an in-person workshop that will be held in Bakersfield this coming Thursday evening. There's more information on that at the notice for this meeting and on the board's website. I want to acknowledge that what we'll be having here is a presentation soon from staff based off of the 2022 groundwater sustainability plan that was submitted to Department of Water Resources and ultimately found inadequate, and is why we're here today. I want to know and acknowledge that here the Kern Subbasin also submitted draft groundwater sustainability plan revisions in late May. The staff did their best to do a red flag review as this draft staff report on the 2022 plans came out, and know that we'll continue to be working with the groundwater sustainability agencies who will actually be here presenting afterwards on those updates as we incorporate them and move to a final draft staff report in anticipation of the probationary hearing, which isn't until February. So that's 6 months from now. No decisions will be made today. This isn't a decision-making spot. This is truly a moment to hear from the community, hear from landowners, agricultural interests, NGOs, others on the groundwater sustainability plans and their suitability. I just, again, am very appreciative of everyone and their time. I know things are very busy. And know again today that no decisions will be made, but instead we're here to really hear from all of you. And thanks again to the staff that have put in a lot of time and effort here to ensure again that translation services are being provided, and we're providing a broad basis for engagement from you all. So thanks for your time. And what I look forward to is, I know, a lot more discussion here within the basin. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chair Esquivel. I will now pass it over to Natalie Stork, Assistant Director at the Office of Sustainable Groundwater Management, for staff introductions.
Good morning. I'm Natalie Stork, and I'm here with Adelia McGregor and Jeevan Jayakody. We are part of the State Water Board's Office of Sustainable Groundwater Management. We are here today because the board will consider whether to adopt a probationary basin determination for the Kern County Subbasin in February of next year. Our 5-member board is either with us today or watching the stream on YouTube. No decisions will be made today. We want to recognize that the Kern County Subbasin groundwater sustainability agencies have been working very hard to improve their groundwater sustainability plans over the last few years. We have been meeting with them frequently to provide guidance and feedback, and we appreciate their coordination and efforts. The agencies recently submitted another batch of draft plans to us in late May. Our team immediately began reviewing these plans. We saw improvement in some areas, which is very encouraging. However, we found that many concerns still remain, which is why we are here today. Later in the presentation, Jeevan will discuss our findings and how they relate to both the old and new plans that have been shared with us. And now Adelia will start us off with background on the Kern County Subbasin.
Thank you, Natalie. Hello and good morning. My name is Adelia McGregor, and I'm an engineering geologist with the Office of Sustainable Groundwater Management with the State Water Board. To start us off, I'll be giving some quick context and background information of groundwater management in the Kern County Subbasin in the Central Valley of California. As many of you know, groundwater is an essential part of California's. As many of you know, I'm going to go forward one slide. Sorry. Thank you. As many of you know, groundwater is an essential part of California's water portfolio, with 80% of Californians relying on groundwater for part of their water supply. During average water years, groundwater makes up 38% of the state's water supply, but during times of drought, groundwater makes up 60% of our supply. As you can see in this figure, groundwater reliance is different in different parts of the state. Because of this, the cornerstone of groundwater management in California is that conditions require local management and local solutions, with oversight and guidance from state water agencies.
Okay, I'm so sorry, Adelia. Give me one moment. It seems like we're having some issue with our Punjabi translation.
No problem.
One moment. Can I confirm that we have Gurpreet or Pramod online right now? Okay. Okay. Great. So I guess we're having a hard time hearing you for the translation. Just want to confirm that translation is ongoing.
Having a hard time hearing
Okay.
me?
Okay. It sounds like it's working now, so thank you, Adelia, and thank you everyone for your patience. I'm gonna let you get started again. Adelia,
Where should we pick up? Where did we lose?
I would say start with this slide, please.
Okay, excellent.
Thank you.
No problem. As many of you know, groundwater is an essential part of California's water portfolio, with 80% of Californians relying on groundwater for part of their water supply. During average water years, groundwater makes up 38% of the state's water supply, but during times of drought, groundwater can make up to 60% of our water supply. As you can see in this figure, groundwater reliance is different in different parts of the state. Because of this, the cornerstone of groundwater management in California is that local conditions require local management and local solutions, with oversight and guidance from state water agencies. California's climate naturally shifts between wet and dry conditions from year to year. During dry years with less rainfall, we rely less on surface water and pump more groundwater to make up this difference. At the time, the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act, which we will often refer to as SGMA, was passed into law in 2014. The majority of the state was experiencing an exceptional drought, the most severe category of drought condition. SGMA was passed in order to be able to sustainably manage groundwater in California for the first time. Each basin would need to come up with their own plan or plans to reach sustainability, especially in groundwater basins that were critically overdrafted, which means they have been severely depleted by pumping. The Kern County Subbasin is a critically overdrafted basin in the Tulare Lake hydrologic region of the southern central Valley. There are several towns and cities in this basin, but the main population center in the subbasin is the city of Bakersfield.
Adelia, if you wouldn't mind slowing down a little bit for the interpreters, please. Thank you.
Groundwater in the Kern County Subbasin is currently managed by 20 identified groundwater sustainability agencies, which we will commonly refer to as GSAs or agencies, with 6 of these agencies forming since 2022. Kern County agencies collaborated to write groundwater sustainability plans, or GSPs, which we may also refer to as plans. These plans outline how the GSAs or the agencies will manage groundwater in the subbasins and bring the basins into a sustainable balance by 2040. The original plans were submitted to the Department of Water Resources in 2020. And the Department of Water Resources determined the plans to be incomplete based on 3 deficiencies. The agencies worked to correct the deficiencies, and revised versions of the 2020 plans were submitted to the Department of Water Resources in August of 2022. We refer to these as the 2022 plans. The Department of Water Resources issued a final determination in March of 2023, stating that the 2022 revised groundwater sustainability plans were inadequate and unlikely to resolve the critical groundwater overdraft in the basin, and recommended the basin to the State Water Board for intervention. Additionally, the Kern County agencies provided new draft plans to the State Water Board on May 28th of this year. We will briefly talk about these new draft 2024 plans later on in this presentation, and the GSAs or the agencies will be able to provide a public comment to discuss their progress in the basin later on as well. A few other things to highlight, although not shown here, that make the Kern County Subbasin unique are the extensive groundwater banking operations and activities and the oil and gas operations that are present throughout the subbasin.
Adelia, I'm sorry, just one more time. Slow down as much as possible. The interpreters are, yeah, they're having a hard time keeping up.
Adelia, we have your talking points, and after each one of your bullets, if you could pause for maybe a second or a second and a half, that might help.
Okay.
Thank you.
Now, let's quickly go over what groundwater is. In the simplest terms, we can think of the Central Valley as a large bathtub full of sediments, such as soil, sand, clay, and rocks, with groundwater filling in the spaces between sediments. The saturated sediment layers that hold usable amounts of groundwater are called aquifers, and sometimes these aquifers are vertically separated clay layers. Now, how do we refill our bathtub? Naturally, rain falling on the land infiltrates through the sediments to recharge the aquifers, as do streams carrying snowmelt and mountain recharge. Shallow groundwater can support vegetation and ecosystems near surface water bodies. Sometimes groundwater contributes to the water flowing in streams and rivers. Groundwater is a critical resource for drinking water, industrial purpose, and agricultural purposes in the subbasin. Looking at our chart on the right, water year 2023, which spans from October 2022 to September 2023, about 925,500 acre-feet were extracted from groundwater, which is approximately 500,000 Olympic-sized pools. Approximately 64% of this groundwater was used by the agricultural industry. Approximately 17% for urban use, 19% for managed recharge, and only 0.5% was categorized as other. These values were reported by the basin's agencies in their 2023 annual report. In the Kern County Subbasin, pumping has exceeded the natural and human-assisted recharge that occurs, and groundwater levels have been in decline for decades, which has required people to deepen their wells or drill new ones to reach deeper groundwater. This slide here displays the results of a dry well susceptibility analysis done by the Department of Water Resources in coordination with the State Water Board. The analysis looked at the declines in groundwater levels during the last drought and predicts which domestic wells would be vulnerable to go dry during a future drought projection. The darker red colors represent areas with a greater number of domestic wells at risk of going dry, and the lighter colored blocks represent fewer at-risk domestic wells. The Kern County Subbasin has approximately 227 domestic wells that are at risk of going dry in a future drought. This map also shows where 10 domestic wells did go dry in water year 2023. These dry wells are marked on the map as small green circles and were reported to the Department of Water Resources as part of an ongoing voluntary dry reporting program.
Thank you, Adelia, for going slower. I'm going to recommend just like 3 more seconds after each statement.
Problem.
Thank you.
In addition to causing dry wells, overpumping groundwater can result in land subsidence. Land subsidence has occurred from large amounts of groundwater having been withdrawn from fine-grained sediments that underline the Kern County Subbasin. As water is removed from the spaces between the fine-grained sediments, the volume is lost and those sediment layers can then compact, filling in the space the water once was, and the land surface then subsides, lowering in elevation. This can cause a permanent reduction in how much groundwater the subbasin can hold and can negatively impact infrastructure such as canals and levees by reducing their carrying capacity and increasing the chances of overtopping in land depressions, causing flooding and pooling. This map displays INSAR data or satellite data that the Department of Water Resources compiled for the time period of June 2015 to January 2024. The green color represents up to a 1/4 foot of increase in land surface elevation, while the darker orange color represents 2.5 feet of subsidence. You'll see that the north region of the subbasin is experiencing the majority of that subsidence. To the east, the Fryant-Kern Canal area has sunk several inches in the Kern County Subbasin, and to the northwest, the California Aqueduct has experienced almost a foot of subsidence and 1/2 foot to the south. This is not nearly as severe as other basins, but subsidence has the potential to cause significant loss in water conveyance capacity in canals, which delivers drinking water to hundreds of thousands of people, if not millions, and delivers irrigation water to over 1 million acres of farmland. Lowering of groundwater levels also has the potential to cause the degradation of groundwater quality. This can occur by moving shallow constituents to deeper depths within the aquifer, changing the natural groundwater environment, causing naturally occurring inert or solid contaminants to dissolve or mobilize into groundwater, or causing the migration of contaminant plumes. This map is based on a coordinated effort by the board's Division of Water Quality and Division of Drinking Water to assess water quality risk to shallow drinking water users, such as domestic and state small well water systems, based on their well depths and existing detections above regulatory thresholds. The map here focuses on nitrate, which is a good proxy constituent because it typically occurs with other human influenced contaminants. It exists at the top of the shallow aquifer at its highest concentration and is the most frequently sampled constituent in our nation. With declining groundwater levels, concentrations of nitrate have been observed to increase in shallow wells. More specifically, domestic drinking water wells. This is despite other reduction efforts in nitrate applications. The map here is displaying where domestic and state small water system users are already considered at risk for nitrate based on existing detections at similar depth wells. Now that we've covered some background context, I will hand it back to Natalie to talk about the Water Board's role in the Kern County Subbasin.
Now that Adelia has talked about some of the issues in the Kern County Subbasin, I'm going to talk about the State Water Board's role in implementing the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act and what that could mean to this area. The Sustainable Groundwater Management Act recognizes that groundwater is a resource that needs to be managed sustainably so that it is available for people to use in the future. Many basins in California are overdrafted, meaning that more water is being pumped out than is being replaced through natural processes. The Sustainable Groundwater Management Act requires that 94 basins in California manage their groundwater sustainably. As Adelia mentioned before, the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act required the formation of new local agencies who are responsible for writing and implementing plans to manage groundwater. The law required the Department of Water Resources to develop the framework for these plans and for the department to determine whether these plans are adequate. If the Department of Water Resources decides that any plans are not sufficient for managing groundwater sustainably, the State Water Board is the backup plan and steps in to help basins get back on track. So, what is sustainability? Sustainability means the basin is operated within its sustainable yield and doesn't experience undesirable results, which are the significant and unreasonable occurrences of these 6 things caused by groundwater conditions occurring throughout the basin. What's important is that sustainability is supposed to be determined by locals at the local level. Note that agencies don't have to address groundwater issues already occurring before 2015. The law focuses on conditions from 2015 forward. The law recognizes that where groundwater is not being managed sustainably, the state should step in to protect groundwater resources until local agencies are ready to manage it on their own. Now, focusing in on the board's role, here are a few key things to remember. The board only steps in when local efforts fail. We can't just step in whenever we want to. The board temporarily protects the basin until locals come up to speed. Board actions are not a replacement for a groundwater sustainability plan. The backstop is triggered by deadlines and deficiencies, which is why we are here today. This is the State Water Board's state intervention process. First, there is a trigger. In this case, that is the plan not being adequate. Then the board considers whether probation is warranted. This is where we are now. Then the board considers whether to put the basin on probation. If the basin is put on probation, then there is a period of at least a year to fix issues. If issues are not fixed, then the board can decide whether to adopt its own plan for the basin. At any time, if agencies think they have fixed their issues, they can provide the new plan or plans to the board for evaluation. If the plan is fixed, we can move the basin out of state intervention and back into the Department of Water Resources oversight. If a basin is put on probation, first the board identifies the problems with the plan. Then agencies work during this time to fix issues while implementing the good parts of their plans. Many people who use groundwater will need to begin reporting how much they pump so the board can assess conditions. The board may require meters so we get accurate information. The board must also begin charging fees. The law states that the board must recover the costs of administering the program. Fees are not meant to be punitive. Here's a bit more on extraction reports. Reports must be submitted annually, and they must include where each well is located, how much it can pump, how much is actually pumped on a monthly basis, where the water is used and what it's used for. Reports must be filed online. Here are our fees that are charged for each required report. We have a base filing fee of $300 per well, also a volumetric fee, which for probationary basins is $20 per acre foot. There is an automatic late fee of 25% per month up to a cap. A few additional notes. Fees are subject to change. The board can require special studies that may incur additional costs, and waivers are available to certain pumpers, such as people with low incomes and community water systems serving disadvantaged communities, if they report on time. Note that most domestic well users will likely not have to report or pay fees. Back to our process slide. We've discussed probation. Now let's discuss what happens if plans aren't fixed. After at least a year, the board can develop and adopt its own plan for the basin. This plan will have corrective actions, monitoring to see how the actions are working, a schedule for the corrective actions, and enforcement to ensure the plan is followed. The important thing is that this plan is meant to be temporary, so it won't include new groundwater recharge or water treatment facilities. it would likely be focused on cutting back pumping. We hope that it doesn't get to this point. The goal is to get this basin and others back on track before we need to get to this.
Natalie, I'm so sorry. I'm gonna take a pause really quickly, and we are going to turn interpretation off, and then we are going to turn it back on to see if that kind of helps some of our issues. So if you are listening in on the Spanish or Punjabi channels, those will be turned off momentarily. So we just ask that you rejoin those channels when we turn it back on.
Canal después de que vayamos a entrar. Cuenta y otras cuentas también estén listas para uso. Vamos a tomar una pausa.
Okay.
Ahora mismo vamos a apagar la interpretación, ya que hay algunos problemas. Si
Okay.
algunos de ustedes están en el canal español o Punjabi, se van a apagar de forma momentánea, por favor. Se les está pidiendo que vuelvan al canal después de que vayamos a entrar. Y otras cuentas también estén listas para uso.
Okay. Jackson, can you please restart?
Vamos a tomar una pausa.
Okay.
Ahora mismo vamos a apagar la
Interpretation has now restarted. Please select either Spanish or Punjabi as your choice of channel by clicking the globe or the globe at the bottom of your screen. It's restarted.
Am I okay to proceed?
Let's give it a go, Natalie.
Thank you. Okay, and now I'm going to hand this over to Jeevan to talk about the draft staff report.
Thank you, Natalie. Hello, everyone. My name is Jeevan Jayakodi. I'm a senior engineering geologist with the State Water Board. The staff of the State Water Board make recommendations to board members regarding the likelihood of basin's plans to achieve sustainability. Today, Adelia and I will present an overview of the staff's draft recommendations for the Kern County Subbasin. The information we are presenting is primarily based on the 2022 groundwater sustainability plans. However, board staff would like to recognize that the Kern County Subbasin agencies have submitted new draft 2024 plans that have not yet been adopted or implemented. Staff have conducted a preliminary review of these draft plans to determine if the agencies have addressed the Department of Water Resources deficiencies and whether to recommend a delay for probation. During this review, board staff determined that the department identified deficiencies remain in the new draft plans. Any delay could further impact groundwater users in the basin if the basin is not guided back on track. Because the identified deficiencies in new draft plans are similar to those identified in 2022 plans, the draft staff report is still relevant to getting the basin back on track. We encourage the Kern County Subbasin agencies to continue addressing any of unresolved deficiencies identified in the staff report and consider adopting the recommended actions to resolve the deficiencies. Board staff continue to review these new draft plans in more detail. Board staff would like to acknowledge the positive momentum the agencies have made on improving the plans and working towards maintaining local control, especially with improved coordination among the agencies.
Jeevan,
Should-
can you slow down a little bit, please?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Today, the agencies have an opportunity to present their progress as a public comment after this presentation. We are encouraged by the Kern County Subbasin agencies' ongoing coordination with us to date, and we will continue to work with them and provide guidance on fixing their plans. For now, we are hoping to learn from you all during this virtual workshop and during the in-person workshop on the 29th in Bakersfield. We intend to update the final staff report based on the comments we receive at these workshops and based on written public comments submitted during the comment period. Based on the 2022 plans and draft 2024 plans, we, the staff, not we, the board, recommend to the board that they designate the Kern County Subbasin probationary. Staff recommend probation because the 2022 and draft 2024 plans, as written, lack coordination and would allow substantial impacts to people who rely on wells for drinking water by causing wells to go dry or become contaminated. The plans could allow for substantial impacts to critical infrastructure due to land subsidence or the sinking of land due to pumping. There would be significant impacts to groundwater quality and potential depletion of interconnected surface water. Also, these plans are unlikely to achieve sustainability, as they would likely result in overdraft occurring beyond 2040. If the board decides to designate the basin probationary, the board must identify the deficiencies in the plans and the potential actions for correcting those deficiencies. The potential actions for each deficiency we will cover today are described in detail in the Kern County Subbasin draft staff report. Now, before we dive into the deficiencies, I will briefly describe how groundwater sustainability plans work. In general, these plans detail various elements like groundwater conditions, which describe the groundwater basin, sustainability criteria, which provide clear metrics for agencies to evaluate their management and determine if they are on track to achieve sustainability and if they are avoiding undesirable results. Monitoring, which is how agencies measure the basin's progress towards its goals. The plans describe what, where, and how often something is being monitored, like groundwater levels or groundwater quality. Projects and management actions, which are the steps agencies take to achieve sustainability. These might include projects that bring in new surface water supplies or rules that restrict groundwater pumping. When the Department of Water Resources reviewed the Kern County Subbasin plans, the department found problems with how agencies were coordinating and how they planned to manage declining groundwater levels and land subsidence. Board staff agree with the department's review, and the draft staff report describes significant deficiencies related to these three categories. In addition to the department's deficiencies, board staff have also identified two more deficiencies. The first one is water quality degradation, specifically how groundwater management can cause pollutants in groundwater to reach levels that are less safe for drinking, irrigation, or other uses. The second one is problems on how the agencies plan to manage depletion of interconnected surface water, which could impact habitats and native ecosystems. Now, let's talk more about the deficiencies. In a basin where multiple plans are submitted, Sigma requires coordination. This is especially complicated in a basin with multiple plans and multiple management areas. That has led the Department of Water Resources and Water Board staff identifying the following crucial deficiencies to get the basin to achieve sustainability. There are inconsistent data and methodologies that are incomparable across plans and plan areas. The description of what the plans are trying to avoid, also known as undesirable results, is unclear. This could result in potential impacts to groundwater users for sustained periods of time and not be considered an undesirable result. In some places, there is a lack of clarity on which agency has the authority to implement plans, or if there is an agency at all. There are also potential impacts due to land subsidence and groundwater quality degradation. Lack of coordination across plans could result in, but are not limited to, the following consequences: lack of communication, disproportional impacts to users across the basin, impacts to other sustainability indicators, no clear responsible party for impacts, and continued localized impacts without triggering any management actions. Other scenarios that could occur are costly and drawn-out disputes that could result in further impacts to users. As previously mentioned, the 2022 plans use inconsistent data and methodologies to define what degree of water level declines would be acceptable. The 2022 plans do not sufficiently describe the impacts that the agencies are trying to avoid. Each plan set their own minimum thresholds to define significant and unreasonable water level declines. So these thresholds varied throughout the basin. In some cases, neighboring wells on opposite sides of a management area boundary would have vastly different water levels to define significant and unreasonable declines. Overpumping in any portion of the basin could cause groundwater levels to decline. Using well depths from the Department of Water Resources, we estimated that approximately 20% of domestic wells and 10% of public supply wells in the basin would be at risk. This could be as many as 437 domestic wells. We acknowledge this number may vary more or less based on pump depths, aquifer characteristics, construction history of individual wells, and the absence of some wells in the database. Wells that were dry prior to 2015 were removed from this count because the agencies are not required to address conditions that occurred before 2015. Declining groundwater levels can cause subsidence, degrade groundwater quality, and deplete interconnected surface water, each of which cause their own set of problems, which will be explained later in this presentation. Board staff also have concerns with how the agencies established their monitoring well networks. Staff do not believe that monitoring networks are representative of all beneficial users or all parts of the aquifer from where different users extract water. Primarily, representative monitoring wells monitor deeper parts of the aquifer, but most domestic wells are in the shallower part of the aquifer. There are many potential consequences of not managing groundwater levels properly. It threatens drinking water sources by causing dry wells or reducing well productivity. It increases costs to drill new, deeper wells or to deepen existing wells. It increases energy cost to pump water from deeper wells. And ultimately, it increases the cost of water for everyone. Also, declined groundwater levels can cause subsidence, degrade groundwater quality, reduce groundwater storage, and deplete interconnected surface water. Board staff have had several meetings with Kern County Subbasin agencies to discuss this topic. We have observed substantial progress in developing a coordinated effort and developing a more robust well inventory for future well impact analysis. With that, I will hand it off to Adelia to present you about the other deficiencies.
Nia, I just want to flag for you that staff cannot hear the Punjabi translation at all right now.
Thank you, Adelia. Yeah, we are working on getting that fixed behind the scenes. Thank you.
Shall I continue?
Yes.
Thank you. And thank you, Jeevan. As I previously discussed in the background section, subsidence is the sinking of the land surface due to overpumping of groundwater from fine-grained sediments. Some of the key issues identified by staff regarding how the 2022 plans handle subsidence in the subbasin are that the various agencies continue to use different data, methodologies, and definitions when establishing critical structure. The plans do not clearly describe what would be considered significant and unreasonable as identified in the undesirable result definition, which is what agencies are supposed to prevent. Without this, the agencies won't be able to tell whether the plans are working. Some of the things they should describe are potential amounts of damage to canals, levees, wells, and loss of aquifer storage. Because of the fragmented approach, it is unclear if the agencies are working towards the same goals. The plans do not adequately explain what impacts would be caused by subsidence due to the declining groundwater levels. The draft mitigation plans do not provide sufficient details regarding how damage to conveyance infrastructure would be addressed if caused by subsidence. Subsidence can reduce the carrying capacity of gravity-driven water conveyance systems. This means that streams, rivers, and canals may carry less water, and therefore, during wet periods, too much water in canals may result in an increased risk of overtopping and flooding. Repairing these canals to restore capacity or after the overtopping and erosion occur is very expensive. Subsidence could also damage wells and reduce access to water. It can damage other infrastructure, such as roads, utilities, pipelines, and even oil infrastructure. It can cause irreversible damage to groundwater aquifers and lasting damage to aquatic ecosystems. And lastly, where subsidence occurs, arsenic concentrations have been seen to increase posing a significant long-term risk to human health if the water is consumed. It is important to note that there are other causes of groundwater quality degradation that are outside of Groundwater Sustainability Agency's control, and the State Water Board does not expect the Kern County agencies to prevent these problems or solve them. To that end, the State Water Board has identified issues with how the 2022 groundwater sustainability plans address groundwater quality degradation within agency control and responsibility. Key groundwater quality deficiencies that board staff have identified are the following. The plans use inconsistent data and methodologies for setting management criteria. The lack of adequate identification of constituents within the subbasin in the 2022 plans do not clearly describe the conditions the basin is trying to avoid, and each continue to define what is significant and unreasonable in each management area in a different way. Some management areas propose to not monitor for water quality. Some monitor for a few constituents, and others use water levels as a proxy for water quality. None of these approaches are similar or coordinated, and it is unclear if the GSAs are working toward the same goal. This fragmented approach could allow for delayed identification in areas with degraded groundwater quality, and likely will allow drinking water to degrade below acceptable drinking water standards. There is inadequate monitoring of domestic drinking water wells and users. In many cases, it is unclear if proposed monitoring wells are in the right part of the aquifer to measure water quality impacts to wells actually in use. And many wells would not be monitored frequently enough to identify issues in a timely manner. There's also no plan to mitigate water quality impacts to drinking water wells. The 2022 plans do not provide sufficient details in how well owners would be supported or notified if their wells are believed to be experiencing degraded groundwater quality due to groundwater management, or as groundwater quality sampling is not a resource many have access to. The degradation of groundwater quality can result in poor drinking water quality, and this may cause health problems, including chronic disease, cancers, reproductive issues, respiratory issues, and may even result in death. Degraded groundwater quality can also cause a foul odor and taste in water and may result in irrigation water that is not suitable for crops. Another potential consequence is that water quality treatment may be difficult and very expensive, if not infeasible. Lastly, water quality degradation may require people to find alternate sources of water. For example, people whose water quality has been degraded may have to rely on tanks of water hauled to their houses until wells can be replaced or until they can be tied into an existing public water system. Interconnected surface water refers to surface water like streams, rivers, or other surface water bodies that are hydrologically connected to groundwater. This means that the area beneath the water body, but above groundwater, is fully saturated. This interconnection has profound impacts on habitat and wildlife. For example, vegetation in an area with interconnected surface water doesn't need deep roots to access water. As groundwater levels decline, the interconnected area of stream bed gets smaller, and if groundwater level decline too much, it goes away entirely. Regarding deficiencies, board staff identified a few deficiencies concerning how the plans manage the depletions of interconnected surface water. The plans do not thoroughly describe potential impacts and what those potential impacts might have on beneficial uses and users. The plans have inconsistent definitions of interconnected surface waters. The plans lack an appropriate assessment of interconnected surface water depletion, especially along portions of the Kern River and Paso Creek. When assessing depletions of interconnected surface water, the plans are not supported with best available information, best available science, or a model that quantifies surface water depletion when assessing for the depletion. And lastly, the plans did not establish a monitoring network designed to address depletions of interconnected surface water, especially in areas closer to headwaters, using wells that would be representative of interconnected surface water. Here are some potential consequences of not managing pumping impacts on interconnected surface water. Depletions can substantially transform or harm habitat and wildlife. Without interconnected surface water, vegetation without deep roots may not be able to access enough water, and reduced surface flows may be inadequate for existing aquatic wildlife. Depletions of interconnected surface water, therefore, substantially threaten recreations like fishing or hunting. And moreover, the reductions in surface flows don't just harm habitat and wildlife, it also reduces the surface water available for human use. So now that I've talked a little bit about, now that I wrapped up the deficiencies for the 2022 plans, I will hand it off to Jeevan to go over the deficiencies for the 2024 plans. Thank you.
Thank you, Adelia. As previously mentioned, board staff conducted a preliminary review of the draft plans that Kern County Subbasin agencies submitted on May 28th of this year. Considering the limited time and potential impacts to beneficial users, staff conducted a high-level preliminary review to determine if the deficiencies were addressed in the new plans and if a delay for probation was reasonable. Board staff found significant improvements in some areas, mostly related to coordination. Staff found that plans now use coordinated data and methodologies, which is a substantial improvement. However, there are issues with the methodologies they chose, which cause other groundwater management challenges. Outside of coordination, board staff observed that many of the deficiencies identified in the staff report remain. which is why we moved ahead with releasing the staff report and scheduling the hearing. We should emphasize that staff are continuing to review these plans and that Kern County Subbasin agencies are still accepting public comments. Board staff at this time continue to recommend that the State Water Board place the basin on probation at the February hearing, pending further improvements to the plans. We ask that Kern County Subbasin agencies continue to work with us to address the issues as identified in the staff report. There is no need to wait for a revised staff report based on the new plans. All of the deficiencies and potential actions to address them can be found in the current staff report. We hope that as we continue to work with the Kern County Subbasin agencies and resolve the remaining issues, we will be able to change our recommendations before the hearing. Following are the deficiencies identified by board staff during the preliminary review. The methodology results in groundwater level minimum thresholds that are not coordinated across management boundaries. This is because the methodology uses an average groundwater level declining rate assigned for a large area to project future water levels. The average rate was calculated using water levels from wells in that area without considering their spatial distribution or local variations. Therefore, this methodology is not consistent with the best available science, and the results may be skewed. The methodology of setting groundwater level minimum thresholds is based on projected trends or historical water level ranges. The groundwater level threshold at a well is set at the deeper value resulted from these two methods, rather than considering impacts to beneficial users. Therefore, water levels may be considered reasonable by agencies, while those levels still causing impacts to beneficial users. In some cases, the new minimum thresholds are deeper than the projected values for 2040 using exceptional drought trends in 2022 plans. These thresholds result in up to 9.3 million acre-feet less groundwater in the basin compared to 2015 low water levels, which are set as the 2040 sustainability goals, known as measurable objectives. Plans do not sufficiently consider the occurrence of confined, unconfined, and semi-confined aquifers when selecting monitoring wells and setting water level thresholds. It causes a lack of protection, including well mitigation, for beneficial users meant to be represented by monitoring networks if a monitoring well is not in the same aquifer as users. As previously mentioned, the new methodology results in groundwater level minimum thresholds that are not coordinated across management boundaries. This can occur when many wells are located in an area with a lower elevation or a steep water level declining trend, while less wells are located in an area with a higher elevation or a more gentle water level declining trend, as shown in the diagram on the left. Because the basin's methodology takes the average water level declining rate for the area, the most severe decline would dominate the average in a situation like this. Applying this steep average rate to estimate minimum thresholds of a well with more gentle trend may not be appropriate. In opposite scenarios, where a majority of wells are experiencing less decline, this method results in more conservative thresholds. However, these conservative thresholds are often replaced by deeper historical water level range-based thresholds. Range-based threshold of a well is deeper than 2015 low water level by 25% of historical water level range of that well. What this means is that you can see in the diagram on the right, two adjacent wells with the same water level could end up with two substantially different thresholds or management action triggers. In fact, we see this in several areas of the basin where there are boundaries with different thresholds on either side. One of the deficiencies that the Department of Water Resources identified in the 2022 plans was the disparate water level thresholds set across the basin, well beyond historical lows of 2015, and how those thresholds would impact beneficial users and other sustainability indicators. Board staff wanted to see how new water level minimum thresholds may impact users in the basin, knowing that the numerical average of thresholds was about 20 feet higher compared to 2022 plans thresholds. This map shows the change of minimum thresholds from 2022 plans to new draft plans, where we see dark orange or brown, water level thresholds have become deeper. Light orange to green or blue show areas where thresholds have become shallower. Based on the city boundaries shown in the main map and locations of existing domestic wells shown in the small map in the left bottom corner, we find that lowered water level thresholds mostly occur in areas where domestic well density is high. In some cases, water level thresholds were lowered by over 100 feet. This means that the new thresholds in the 2024 plans seem to be far more less protective than the thresholds in previous plans. This map shows the difference between thresholds set in new draft plans and fall 2023 water levels available from the Department of Water Resources. You can see that new thresholds are well below fall 2023 water levels in majority of the basin area. In orange or brown areas on the map, thresholds are more than 100 or 200 feet deeper than 2023 low water levels. Another thing to note here is that fall 2023 water levels are very close to or deeper than the threshold in blue areas. Overall, we see highly variable water level thresholds throughout the basin. This occurs because the methodology used to establish thresholds is not consistent with the best scientific practices. Using the arithmetic average of rates or trends to describe central tendencies over a large area without additional statistical method is not appropriate. This means that the agencies used scientifically inappropriate methods to develop these thresholds. We also noticed that these thresholds are much lower than groundwater levels observed in the last fall in many areas of the basin. Earlier, I mentioned that the new draft plans did not sufficiently consider confined, unconfined, and semi-confined aquifers. Here are two hydrographs, which are graphs that show the water levels in wells over time. Each hydrograph here shows water levels of two wells located at the same geographic location, but screened at different depths. Blue points show water levels of the shallower well, and red point shows water levels of the deeper well. Two sets of wells shown here are located at different areas in the basin. As you can see here, water levels between the deeper and shallower wells vary significantly. So it's crucial that the plans identify appropriate monitoring wells for different portions of the aquifer to represent beneficial users and users at those locations. This means proper groundwater management requires monitoring for confined and unconfined aquifers, or different depth zones of the aquifer, and setting different thresholds for each zone. This also applies for other sustainability indicators. For instance, groundwater quality can significantly vary between different depths of the aquifer. Some contaminants may be localized to shallow or deeper parts of the aquifers. When subsidence is considered, it is mainly caused by pumping from confined aquifers of the confined portions of the aquifer. Here are the other deficiencies that staff observed in the 2024 draft plans. The uncertainty with how water banking and recharge operations will impact basin management. Incomplete subsidence mitigation plans and inadequate explanations of contribution of oil and gas operations for subsidence. The plans state that impacts of subsidence that can be mitigated are not considered undesirable results. The plans mention a subsidence mitigation plan that is already being led by outside efforts for infrastructure repair for the Kern Canal. However, plans do not describe a clear mitigation plan to pay for any additional mitigation of impacts caused by basin management. Additionally, some areas of the basin have critical infrastructure and oil and gas extractions. The plans state that some subsidence is caused entirely by oil and gas extractions without adequate justification, particularly in areas where there is groundwater pumping for agriculture. The plans state that agencies will coordinate with California Aqueduct Subsidence Program if exceedances occur. The agencies should coordinate with the California Geologic Energy Management Division, also known as CalGEM, who has the regulatory authority over oil and gas operations, to evaluate if there have been any instances of oil and gas related subsidence, or pursue other means of justification for the statements. Next, there is lack of clarity on how Kern County Subbasin agencies will address minimum threshold exceedances for groundwater quality caused by groundwater management, especially for mitigation and how users will be notified. And lastly, agencies do not define or monitor interconnected surface water consistent with the requirement of SGMA. Following are the resulting concerns around these deficiencies. Lack of separation of confined, unconfined, and semi-confined aquifers results in insufficient monitoring plans and well impact analysis, which leads to insufficient well mitigation plans. Various impacts can occur to beneficial users and users in the basin due to declined water levels, degraded water quality, and subsidence. These significant impacts can occur without being considered an undesirable result according to the definitions in the plans. And lastly, there may be an inability to implement projects and management actions, including water banking and recharge operations, to properly account for water availability where they are recharging and extracting. And now I will turn it back over to Natalie.
Thank you, Jeevan. Natalie, before you start, I would just like to acknowledge that we are having trouble with the Punjabi translation services today. We really thank you for your patience, and we will be offering a recording of this presentation in Punjabi on the website after the meeting is completed. So if you have any questions about that, we'll share the email later and we can communicate about that and make sure you have the right information. So passing it back to you, Natalie. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeevan and Mia. Okay, in addition to the deficiencies noted by Jeevan and Adelia, staff have additional recommendations to the board. Now I'm going to go over recommended requirements that would apply to groundwater extractors in the draft staff report. These would only apply if the board puts the basin on probation at the hearing in February. If the board puts the basin on probation, staff recommend excluding household domestic well users from reporting and fees. The law does this by default, but gives the board flexibility to include domestic well users in some circumstances. We recommend that the board stick with the default and exempt household domestic well users. For those who do have to report, staff recommend moving the default reporting deadline forward 2 months to December so that we can get necessary information sooner in case we need to write our own plan. Staff recommend that anyone who pumps 500 acre-feet or more per year from the basin install a certified meter so that we can get accurate data. While the Tulare Lake and Tule Subbasin, they also had recommendations of 500 acre-feet or more, and we find that setting the threshold at 500 acre-feet for the Kern County Subbasin should cover most of the groundwater pumped from this basin. Staff recommend that anyone who pumps from wells adjacent to the Friant Kern Canal or the California Aqueduct install a certified meter so that we can get accurate data on pumping near this infrastructure. The law allows the board some leeway to exclude areas of the basin from probation. Since all of the plans were determined to be inadequate by the Department of Water Resources, at this time, we recommend any probationary determination apply to all of the plans. Staff will continue reviewing the 2024 draft plans and any updates, and this recommendation may change in the future. That concludes our presentation on recommendations in the draft staff report. Next, I'll walk through the schedule leading up to a hearing. Here's the schedule. On July 25th, we released the draft staff report and issued the hearing notice to cities, counties, our mailing list, and the Department of Water Resources. On July 26th, we mailed the notice to all known pumpers. Our public comment period runs from July 26th to September 23rd. Today is our first stakeholder meeting, and we are holding our second stakeholder meeting in Bakersfield on August 29th. We will review all public comments submitted by the deadline and use this information to revise our draft staff report and potentially the recommendations within the report. We plan to release the final staff report in January of 2025, along with the draft resolution for the board to consider at the hearing. The hearing is scheduled for February 20th, 2025, where the board will consider a probationary determination for the basin. And now I will hand it back to Mia.
Thank you, Natalie, for your presentation. We are now moving to the question and answer portion of the workshop. This time is for you all to ask clarifying questions regarding the content you just learned about from the state intervention process. We will be taking questions in the chat. Our state board staff member, Dorina, will be directing the questions to the proper staff members. And depending on the number of questions we have, we are a bit behind on our schedule right now. We may or may not be able to respond to all of them before we move on. We will be providing the Kern County Subbasin email address provided in the chat. So you're welcome to email questions as well. And you're welcome to put your email and your question in the chat, and we can reach out to you that way as well. If there are any questions, Dorina. And we're going to be taking questions via chat. So if you have a question, please type it into the chat. Jackson, can you allow Dorina to unmute, please?
Yes, hi. Okay, I will be reading the questions. First question is regarding the deeper aquifer well. Deeper aquifer well with a higher fluid level than the shallower zone well. And that was the question.
Natalie, is that clear enough?
Oh, Yes, sorry, I was having a hard time unmuting. Can we please repeat the question since I had an issue unmuting there?
Certainly, the question that we received was, and I will read it verbatim, deeper aquifer well with a higher fluid level than the shallower zone well.
Yes, I believe this is in reference to some of the technical slides we shared towards the end of our presentation. We were indeed trying to share information showing that there are multiple aquifer zones, and yes, there was a water level that's higher in a deeper aquifer than a shallow aquifer. This is something that can happen, and that's why we believe it's important to properly characterize aquifers. So that was sort of a high-level description of the point of that slide.
Thank you, Natalie.
Are we ready for the next question?
Yes, go for it, Dorina.
Second question, is the Water Board proposing faulting and geology features should the applied in lieu of averaging approach, referring to the cartoon on the well count and the decline rate with the contour map?
So this is a very specific question referring to technical information in our staff report. I want to be helpful and answer all of these questions, but I think this is a larger conversation. I'm going to ask that regarding this one, if you could please email our SGMA inbox. We'll look into it and our staff will get back to you with an answer on this question.
Thanks, Natalie. We have just put the email into the chat, so please feel free to use that. Dorina, you're welcome to go to the next question.
Define adjacent. How many feet? And then I have a second question that I believe is related. Define adjacent to critical infrastructure. How many feet from?
We're really getting into the details here, and I appreciate the concern about the details. We will circle back with a response on that, but for highly technical questions about our staff report, please reach out to our team at the SGMA inbox.
Okay, next question. Why would you refuse to allow some GSAs to not be included in probation? What is the goal? Is it compliance or execution?
So SGMA, the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act, the law itself, notes there's a few possible exemptions from a probationary determination. SGMA gives the State Water Board the ability to look at the plans for a basin, and if a basin doesn't have plans that are adequate based on DWR's determination, when the board is considering the basin for probation, the board has the ability to potentially exclude certain areas of the basin from probationary status. That is what we were referring to in our presentation today. That's part of our staff's assessment when we're reviewing groundwater sustainability plans. If there is an area that is successfully sustainably managing groundwater, the board can consider that and tailor its determination to encourage that to continue. So that is part of our process, and that's something we're going to continue to consider.
Thank you, Natalie. Okay, moving on. There was a mention about the methodology behind threshold not being up to date with some scientific research. Are there specific scientific studies that the board might recommend for laying out the thresholds for plans?
So I appreciate this question. This is a very detailed technical question, and our staff would be happy to engage in a conversation, but this is a bit of a very long answer, and we have a very wide and varied audience here. So please reach out to our SGMA inbox. I want to point out that we've been meeting with the groundwater sustainability agencies in the Kern County Subbasin regularly over the last year and a half to talk through the technical issues that we have with their plans. And we very deeply appreciate their coordination, and we enjoy working with them and having those technical conversations. Of course, nobody enjoys being in the situation of potentially triggering state intervention. But we just really appreciate their engagement and working with us. We are having these technical conversations with them. Ultimately, it's up to the GSAs to determine and propose the approaches that they're going to use to set thresholds in their plans. And our staff are doing our best to make sure we do a thorough review so that we can make appropriate recommendations. We're going to continue working with the GSAs to address these technical questions so that they have the ability to revise their plans further. And our goal here is to get the basin back on track, not to put it on probation. So we look forward to continuing to have those technical conversations. And for anyone who's not in these GSA meetings, please feel free to reach out to our SGMA inbox, and you can reach our staff and we can follow up on these types of questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Natalie. I think we have time for one more question, Dorina.
Okay. You stated that you recommended no exclusions from probation. Why do you make that recommendation? Why specifically recommend in your staff report when the board will ultimately decide?
So we recommended that there be no exclusions from probation based on the information we had at the time that the staff report was released. And that recommendation is based on the fact that the Department of Water Resources found the plans to be inadequate for the basin. As was mentioned earlier, new plans, revised plans were turned in late May, and our team immediately began reviewing these plans. And we did find some improvements, but we still have concerns. We're going to continue reviewing those plans. There are many plans. These are long. These are technically complex. And we really appreciate a lot of the improvements that have been made. As we continue to review these plans, if we see any that we believe meet the requirements of the statute, we will recommend, we may potentially, depending on certain things, we can change our recommendations to the board. And the question about why we make a recommendation when the board has discretion, the point of the staff report is to make our staff recommendation to the board. The board has the ultimate decision-making authority on, pretty much all the aspects of this decision here. So that's our staff recommendation at this time. And we really encourage public comment and engagement from the public. That's why we're here today. We want to hear from the public. We want to have some time to answer your questions, but we really want to hear about the public's thoughts, as do our board. That's why our board is either on the Zoom or listening on the YouTube today. And we're looking forward also to our workshop coming up this Thursday in Bakersfield, where we can continue to engage with people in person.
Thank you, Natalie, very much. We definitely have more questions in the chat than we are able to answer currently. Again, I highly recommend you send your questions to the email provided in the chat, and somebody from the Water Board will reach out to you. So thank you for answering those questions, Natalie. We are going to move on to our public comment portion of this meeting. This portion of the meeting will start with a presentation from the Kern County Subbasin Groundwater Sustainability Agencies. The Kern County GSAs submitted a new GSP on May 28th, and considering this update, the State Water Board wanted to provide space for you all to hear from the GSAs themselves on their most updated plans. This presentation will act as the GSA's public comment. If after their presentation you have questions regarding any of the information that you hear, we encourage you to reach out to the GSA directly via emailing Kristen Piddock. We have provided her contact information in the chat here, so that is available. Please note that the presentation slides are only currently available in English, but will continue to be translated by our interpreters as best as possible. And we will be sharing translated versions online post-meeting. So I will now hand it over to Derek Urosic, Chairman of the Coordination Committee for the Kern County Subbasin.
Great. Thank you very much, Mia. And good afternoon, State Water Resource Control Board members and staff, and members of the public attending today's workshop. My name is Derek Urosic, and I am the chair of the Kern County Subbasin Coordination Committee, which represents all the Kern County Subbasin GSAs. We wanted to extend our thanks to the State Water Resource Control Board staff for allowing a 30-minute presentation during staff's public workshops. Our presentation reflects a highly coordinated effort from all subbasin interests, covering 20 GSAs in the largest and most complex basin in the state. Our focus is to address the year-long development of the 2024 GSP, which we believe addresses DWR deficiencies, is protective to all beneficial users, meets sustainability goals, and is compliant with SGMA regulations. Our goal is to continue SGMA's intent of local control and adaptive management. As such, we request the State Water Resource Control Board staff to thoroughly review the 2024 GSPs. With that, I will hand it over to the Subbasin Technical Working Group lead, Anona Dutton, to walk through our presentation today.
Good morning, Chair Esquivel and members of the board, staff, and public. On behalf of the Kern Subbasin GSAs and the Technical Working Group, thank you for the opportunity to present today. By way of introduction and background, my name is Anona Dutton, and I am a professional geologist and hydrogeologist in the states of California and Washington. I have undergraduate and graduate degrees in hydrogeology from Stanford, and as vice president at EKI, I have been a practicing hydrogeologist for over 20 years, with more than 10 years of direct SGMA experience in the Kern Subbasin. The goal today is to provide a high-level overview of the 2024 plan, with a focus on how, in its high degree of coordination, its focus on protecting beneficial uses and users, and its clear articulation of a path to sustainability, the 2024 plan fully complies with the intent and regulations of SGMA. We also want to express our commitment to continue to coordinate with the State Board so that we can come to a more complete understanding and alignment on key issues, and move towards what we understand is a shared goal to have this basin avoid probation and, per a foundational principle of SGMA, maintain local control in the achievement of groundwater sustainability. As we begin, I want to take a minute to comment on scale. You will probably hear some numbers in the presentation and see some in the plan that will seem very large, like our overdraft mitigation targets or the number of GSAs, and others that are relatively small, like the number of wells that will potentially be impacted. I want to put this in context. At close to 1.8 million acres, the Kern Subbasin is the largest groundwater basin in the state. For perspective, 40 of the 71 plans with approved GSPs, many with multiple GSAs, could fit within the Kern Subbasin. So by those standards, realistically, a minimum of 40 plus GSAs and GSPs could be managing the basin, as opposed to the coordinated 2024 plan that the GSAs have developed. Also, 6 of the 9 approved basins in the Central Valley, or 4 of the 6 inadequate basins, could all fit within Kern. Highlighting again just the significant volume of resources and beneficial uses and users that are actively being considered and managed within this plan. All that complexity notwithstanding, the 20 GSAs have come together to develop a 2024 plan that is highly coordinated and relies on standardized and best available data and methodologies to address the DWR deficiencies. It was prepared by experts and principals from 7 of the top consulting firms in the state, in close coordination with the very experienced water managers and policymakers in the subbasin. The Sustainable Management Criteria, or SMCs, and undesirable results definitions have been revised to incorporate DWR and state board feedback and to be significantly more protective of beneficial uses and users. The 2024 plan clearly identifies the GSA's commitment to achieving the sustainability goal through the implementation of a robust suite of projects and management actions with a focus on demand reduction. Finally, the plan establishes coordinated sub-basin-wide initiatives, such as our well mitigation program, which builds from the several existing well mitigation programs that are active in the basin and will be funded and operational in 2025. Foundational to the comprehensive rewrite of the 2024 plan was the agreement the GSAs made early in the process to develop the 2024 plan based on the following guiding principles. First, a commitment to subbasin coordination. Second, to fully address the DWR deficiencies and to incorporate the feedback received to date from state board staff. Third, to consider and protect the beneficial uses and users of groundwater. Fourth, to prioritize demand management as a strategy for reaching sustainability. And fifth, to capture the hydrogeologic and other complexities throughout this huge subbasin through the delineation of HCM areas to inform monitoring, SMC development, etc. The GSAs have conducted extensive stakeholder outreach throughout the 2024 plan development. Notably, we coordinated closely with Kern County and State Board Department of Drinking Water to improve our well inventory. We have established key partnerships for ongoing well monitoring and mitigation with the Kern Water Collaborative and self-help enterprises. We have coordinated closely and received support from both CASP and Friant Water Authority on our approach to subsidence. The public drinking water suppliers, including those from the disadvantaged communities within the basin, have been very actively involved in SGMA. Many, in fact, are direct participants on GSA boards and committees. There has also been direct coordination with our neighboring basins, including data sharing. And the GSAs have hosted meetings for local landowners and water users within their boundaries. The GSAs have all published the 2024 plan on their websites and continue to welcome public comment. Please use the QR code here to find additional information as to how to engage and review the 2024 plan. We understand that an issue of concern in the draft staff report is on the principal aquifer definitions provided in the 2024 plan. I will remind all of us that the GSP regulations define principal aquifer as an aquifer or aquifer system that stores, transmits, and yields significant quantities of groundwater. In its description of the Kern Subbasin, the USGS found that because of the heterogeneous character of most of the unconsolidated alluvial deposits, confinement is commonly a matter of degree, and where the Corcoran clay is thin or absent, there is direct hydraulic connection. We agree with the USGS's characterization of the principal aquifer systems in the Kern Subbasin. And the 2024 plan includes an extensive discussion of the confined, semi-confined, and unconfined areas within the basin. What the 2024 plan articulates is that while the Corcoran clay and other clay beds are present at various locations and depths in the Kern Subbasin, in high contrast with the basins immediately to the north, it is estimated that only 10% of the basin, primarily in the northern portion, includes a competent and intact Corcoran clay layer within about 300 feet of the ground surface. The remaining clay layers are either very shallow and create perching, very deep, like 600 or more feet deep, leaky, and or discontinuous. This heterogeneity helped inform the HCM delineations, and no one is saying they don't create localized confined or semi-confined conditions. It's that this aquifer system complexity is not inconsistent with the 2024 plan's definition and management of a primary alluvial aquifer system. What would in fact be a real challenge would be to artificially delineate and attempt to do coordinated management across a complex and hydraulically connected aquifer system. Here is another representation of the hydrogeology of the subbasin with a cross-section slice right through the middle of the basin. You can see on the left many of the structural features controlling groundwater quality and groundwater levels and flow patterns. You can see the very discontinuous presence of aquitards, and you can see how groundwater wells are primarily concentrated in the center of the basin. You can also see in the pink and yellow the primary alluvial aquifer system, and to the east, in blue and orange, the deep confined Santa Margarita and Ulysses aquifers. The principal aquifers are defined in a way that makes sense for how this basin was formed and how it is used and managed. To that point, since the early 1970s, DWR and the Kern County Water Agency have produced groundwater level maps that represent conditions consistent with the same understanding of the existence of a primary alluvial aquifer system in the basin. This map highlights some of the key drivers of the local and regional groundwater flow patterns across the basin, including the geologic, pumping, and recharge influences. The 2024 plan includes an expanded and improved representative monitoring network for both water levels and water quality, as shown here. This slide shows the primary revisions made to the sustainable management criteria for each of the sustainability indicators. In all instances, the 2024 plan presents one definition for each sustainability indicator, the metrics that will be tracked on a subbasin scale, and the GSA actions that will be triggered in the event of an MT exceedance. On average, the SMCs for chronic lowering of groundwater levels have increased across the subbasin since the 2022 GSPs. As I will discuss later, the 2024 plan presents a comprehensive subbasin-wide well impacts analysis under various MT exceedance scenarios to further justify the SMC's definition. The SMCs for land subsidence have been updated to include both site-specific and HCM area average land subsidence rate and extent SMCs, as well as a clear mitigation plan. The SMCs for degraded water quality have been updated to address the key constituents of concern identified by the state board and establishes frequent monitoring at key sites in proximity to sensitive beneficial users. The SMCs for reduction of groundwater storage use groundwater levels as a proxy, and the undesirable results definition has been defined and justified based on estimates of total usable groundwater storage in the basin. Finally, the SMCs for depletions of interconnected surface water will be reassessed after DWR's guidance on interconnected surface waters is released, following the approach taken in many other basins. As an example of, As an example of how thoughtfully and thoroughly the GSAs approach these revised SMCs in a coordinated fashion, I will walk you through the groundwater level SMC process in some detail. The first step was to identify the beneficial users, the most vulnerable of which are the drinking water users, and then to define an undesirable results definition for the subbasin. The very strict criteria of not letting more than 15 drinking water wells go dry in a year was decided upon by the GSAs. Again, no more than 15 wells across a 1.8 million acre subbasin. Then, multiple different potential SMC and MT methods were conceptualized, including methods approved by DWR in other basins. All told, 11 different MT methodologies were developed and then tested across a variety of technical analysis, including well impacts, reasonable gradients, margins of operational flexibility, etc. Then the SMC approach was selected that best aligned with the SGMA regulations, address GSA and stakeholder concerns, could be applied basin-wide, and avoided undesirable results. This figure shows the end result of that process, with the MOs and MTs across the subbasin as compared to 2015 water levels. Again, these SMCs were developed through transparent technical analysis and justification, consistent with the GSP regulations and using common data and methodologies that DWR has approved in other basins. The MTs were raised by 20 feet on average relative to 2022. They reflect HCM-specific groundwater conditions and trends and do not result in unreasonable gradients within and between basins. Most importantly, as I will show you, they do not result in significant and unreasonable impacts to beneficial users. As I previously mentioned, a guiding principle of the 2024 plans is the protection of beneficial uses and users. To that end, the GSAs have spent the last several years conducting their own well inventories and working closely with Kern County, State Board, Department of Drinking Water, and other sources to inventory and map the locations, depths, and types of wells throughout the basin. This is a work in progress, and the GSAs are actively working to refine their inventories, which includes physically reviewing each well completion report to get accurate coordinates, correct construction details, and conduct field verification of the status of wells. We are confident that the well database we have that shows about 7,000 wells across the basin is the best available data, consistent with the SGMA standard. I mention this because you can see, for example, the wildly different well counts you might start with if you, for example, just use the DWR OSCA database. And so you would be right to be skeptical if someone presented you with a very large number of potentially impacted wells in the subbasin based on a single hypothetical MT surface applied against that OSCA data set. We have not done that in the Kern Subbasin. What we have done to better understand potential impacts to drinking water wells included numerous sophisticated analyses, including numerical modeling to better understand where and how many drinking water wells might be vulnerable to impact. I'll walk you through that analysis now. As much as we would like to, we don't exactly have a crystal ball to know exactly which, if any, representative monitoring wells will exceed the MTs in the future, and which drinking water wells could be impacted. However, what we can do is ask the question multiple different ways in order to better understand the potential likelihood or risk. As such, we conducted a multifaceted well impacts analysis. We looked at a potential worst case where every representative monitoring well hit its MT. We bracketed the potential impacts by looking at the representative monitoring wells that had the most and least drinking water wells in near vicinity, and then we went deeper.
Nona, I'm just going to just ask you to slow down just slightly for the interpretation. Thank you.
Specifically, we ran 5,000 potential realizations of different MT surfaces where different combinations of representative monitoring wells, up to 25%, would hit their MT. Based on that stochastic analysis, on average, 103 drinking water wells have the potential to be impacted between now and 2040. That's 103 wells across this 1.8 million acre subbasin, representing about 2% of the domestic and municipal water supply. Especially given the well mitigation program being developed, this level of potential impact is not significant and unreasonable, and is certainly less than that anticipated in several of the basins that DWR has approved. To understand the issue even further, we ran the groundwater model for the basin. Looking at various climate change and other scenarios and projecting the water table surface across the basin on a transient basis, we estimate that between 13 and 77 drinking water wells have the potential to be impacted between now and 2040. That's 13 to 77 wells across this 1.8 million acre subbasin, representing about 1% of the domestic and municipal water supply. Again, given the well mitigation program being developed, this level of potential impact is not significant and unreasonable, and is less than that anticipated in several of the basins that DWR has approved. The next two slides highlight subbasin-wide policies, which are key to holding all GSAs accountable for the improvement of subbasin conditions. The MT exceedance policy establishes protocols and guidelines to investigate and address issues in the event of even a single MT exceedance for all applicable sustainability indicators. This ensures that we can be proactive and avoid undesirable results. The second policy is regarding domestic well mitigation. The 2024 plan includes two key attachments. The first is a letter of intent with self-help enterprises to implement a sub-basin-wide domestic well mitigation program to be funded by the sub-basin GSAs by 2025. And the second is a memorandum of understanding with the Kern Water Collaborative to collaborate on water quality testing, to avoid duplicative efforts, and to provide replacement water if nitrate levels are found to exceed the MCLs. Collectively, the MT exceedance policy and the planned well mitigation program will ensure that significant and unreasonable impacts to beneficial users do not occur. I will just quickly touch now on the coordinated and improved sustainable management criteria for the other relevant sustainability indicators. With respect to subsidence, it is really important to recognize that not all subsidence is caused by groundwater pumping. In fact, we have multiple drivers in this basin, including oil and gas production, seismic related subsidence, and hydrocompaction. A comprehensive risk-based approach was taken to establish the subsidence SMCs in a consistent methodology across the subbasin. Notably, the approach we have taken, which minimizes subsidence by 2040, includes GSA mitigation for the Friant-Kern Canal and has been developed in coordination with both Friant Water Authority and CASP. We have even included a letter of support from Friant in the 2024 plan. As for water quality, our approach is based on addressing the constituents of concern that have been identified by the state board, based on a detection in at least 3 wells in the 1.8 million acre basin. We have set the SMCs informed by MCLs and pre-SGMA background conditions. And we have set up a monitoring schedule to comply with SGMA and to coordinate with the sampling being done for irrigated lands and for State Board Department of Drinking Water reporting. As noted previously, the MT exceedance policy applies to any water quality exceedance, and we have an extremely strict undesirable results definition, which is triggered if 3 wells exceed their MT due to GSA groundwater management, meaning extraction or recharge. In the event of drinking water impacts, we have partnerships set up with the Kern Water Collaborative and self-help enterprises to ensure mitigation is consistent and comprehensive with other programs. With respect to interconnected surface waters, the best available data and following the procedures outlined in available guidance confirms that there are no interconnected surface waters or groundwater dependent ecosystems in the subbasin. However, the GSAs will continue to revisit this issue as additional guidance and data become available. One additional topic we wanted to address is water banking. I know there have been a lot of questions about the banking programs in Kern, and we would be happy to have additional discussions with you and expect that you will also learn a lot on the forthcoming tours. At the highest level, surplus surface water is stored in the basin and extracted later in accordance with the operating rules of each of the banks. Through the benefits of leave-behinds, the banks have contributed to water levels and water quality in the basin. In short, the banks are a critical part of the current and future path to sustainability in the basin, and frankly, for the state writ large. With respect to defining a path to sustainability, the GSAs have identified a comprehensive suite of projects and management actions composed of both demand reduction, and water supply augmentation projects to address the identified future deficit under climate change conditions. The benefits realized from active and planned demand reduction are anticipated to address over 80% of the deficit by 2040. Additionally, we note that given the extensive suite of projects being planned or in development, even if only 50% of the benefits are realized, the subbasin GSAs will still meet the targeted deficit reduction by 2040. So while I know this has been a lot of information, I do want to point out that the 2024 plan that the GSA submitted on May 28th represented a complete and comprehensive overhaul of the 2022 GSPs. As such, we did feel like there was a real missed opportunity when the draft staff report was published in late July, with more than 200 pages focused on the obsolete 2020 and 2022 GSPs, with only 1.5 pages included a very cursory review of this comprehensive plan. We note that you've identified several more deficiencies than DWR did, but upon review, we were pleased to see that we felt that we had proactively already addressed those issues in the 2024 plan. For example, a deficiency and requested action was that we have an empty exceedance policy. As I mentioned today, the 2024 plan includes such a policy already. We were also surprised that some of the issues raised by staff in the letter were not things that have come up during the more than 20 hours of meetings we have had with you over the last year, walking transparently through every detail of the 2024 plan. We also cannot replicate the MT maps that you showed, so we really would like to work with you to make sure that we are using a consistent data set to understand the differences between the 22 and 2024 MT maps in the subbasin. We do, in that vein, really appreciate that staff has agreed to continue to meet with us. And as I said in the beginning, we are hoping that once we're able to spend more time together with the 2024 plan and dive into the details and data sets that were included, we will find that in fact we are much closer aligned than the draft staff report would suggest at first blush. In conclusion, the 2024 plan that was submitted to you in May addresses the DWR corrective actions and the feedback provided by State Board staff to date. Having prepared many successful GSPs, I feel confident that you will find that the quality and comprehensiveness of this plan meets or exceeds those previously approved by DWR. The 2024 plan demonstrates that the Kern Subbasin GSAs are capable and committed to providing coordinated, sustainable groundwater management for the Kern Subbasin. Unlike some of the other basins subject to State Board intervention, the Kern Subbasin GSAs have not fractured and turned on each other. They remain strongly coordinated behind this credible and serious plan to achieve sustainability. We look forward to working with the state in the coming months towards the stated common goal of supporting sustainable management of groundwater resources at the local level. We can go to the next slide. Thank you so much for your time and attention. And to members of the public here, I encourage you not to just take my word for it. Please follow the codes here to access the 2024 plan and other stakeholder outreach resources and provide us with your feedback. Thank you again so much.
Thank you so much, Anona, and thank you for joining today to share Kern County Subbasin GSA's updated information. If you have, and if anybody in the participants would like to learn more, I recommend reaching out via email to Kristen Pitak, and her email will be in the chat. We'll now be moving to the public comment portion of the meeting. We are extending the meeting until 2 p.m. to allow time for further public comment. To deliver a verbal comment, please raise your hand and I will call on you in the order of the hands raised. I will call on you and then queue up the next person, so be on the lookout for your name. As a reminder, you can mute and unmute yourself by using the microphone button at the bottom left hand of your screen. For those on the phone, you can choose *6 to unmute. Please be ready to come off mute when you are called on. Written comments can also be submitted in the chat and will be saved by the Water Board staff. If you prefer to provide an anonymous comment, please email your comment to the Kern County Subbasin email that has been provided. And then to ensure adequate time is available for commenters, we are going to be limiting each comment to 2 minutes. So I'm going to start the timer there. All right, let's see here. 1 second. Okay, I'm going to open the floor for Mayor Chad Gibbons.
Good afternoon, Mia, and good afternoon, everybody. I hope you guys can hear me well. My name is Chad Gibbons, and I am the mayor for the city of Shafter. The most critical service provided by the city is delivering safe and reliable water to its residents and businesses. Unfortunately, providing the service has become extremely challenging, mostly due to prolonged droughts and increasing regulations. Funding the staff, equipment, and other resources needed to provide water is even more challenging because many of the city's residents live within several economically disadvantaged communities. Fortunately, the city has a history and proven track record working with its regional water partners, notably the Shafter-Wasco Irrigation District GSA and the North Kern Water Storage District GSA. That has resulted in responsive and coordinated groundwater pumping. While the city does not rely on surface water supplies, it benefits significantly from SWID and North Kern water supplies for the groundwater recharge that stabilizes groundwater levels. The GSAs have allowed the city to assume an active role in the groundwater sustainability plan process to ensure that its residents and businesses, including disadvantaged communities, have a voice and access to clean water supplies now and in the future. In fact, the 2024 GSPs submitted to the state have made maintaining drinking water supplies a top priority. Our city wells will not be dewatered, water quality will be protected, and mitigation will be in place for domestic or community wells impacted by declining groundwater levels. Having the city's water service area subject to SGMA probation would be detrimental to our local economy, which is heavily dependent on agriculture jobs and production. Furthermore, this is putting Kern County on probation will result in imminent layoffs of hundreds, possibly thousands of agriculture jobs. However, the impacts extend beyond economics because limited water supplies also limit our ability to grow a community and improve the quality of life for those we serve. So while there are still groundwater challenges to address, the city firmly believes that the current GSPs significantly improve groundwater protections and put the region on a coordinated path to sustainability. Therefore, on behalf of the city of Shafter, I respectfully urge the state board members and staff to engage with the local GSAs, quickly review the 2024 GSPs, provide specific feedback, and ultimately accept the practical solutions presented. Most importantly, everyone should be mindful of the detrimental impact SGMA probation would have on our local communities, which are already facing significant financial hardships. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next up we have, let's see. Okay, next up we have S. Taylor. And then after that, we'll have Jasmine Ramirez. So go for it, S. Taylor.
Thank you, Mia and members of the board. My name is Scott Taylor, and I am the General Manager for the Lamont Public Utility District in the southeast portion of Bakersfield. I'm not going to give you a big narrative. I just want to leave you with some food for thought ideas, primarily for the chairman and the board members to contemplate. First off, I want to say, I think Anona covered it exponentially well, and I really hope that you either took some notes or really paid attention to what she said, because she basically said everything that I wanted to. So I trust that you heard what she said. I think her presentation was crystal clear on the sub-basin's position as a whole. She is correct that we are coordinated. I'm a GM of a severely disadvantaged community. A couple of the board members are familiar with us. So you can appreciate when I tell you that we are exponentially coordinated. A couple of things I'd like you to consider as food for thought. And please don't be offended, but it's important that you hear this. I want you to consider that since we're trying to get to 2040 as compliance date, why do we jump straight to probation? You know, it's like judge, jury, and executioner when we need the opportunity to demonstrate that we can comply. You know, is it compliance is the goal, or is crucifixion the goal? So I think that's food for thought for the board members. The other thing is that I'd like you to consider that if you do consider probation, as the previous speaker mentioned, please consider the significant impacts that the fees, the costs, the recoveries, and all of that is going to have on all of the water purveyors, not just the significantly disadvantaged, because of course, as you can appreciate, ag is a huge component of the Kern County basin and area as a whole. So again, just in closing, it's just food for thought, and I trust you will take that into consideration as you make a determination and have discussions. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for your comments. We are going to be moving to Jasmine Ramirez and then on to Mac Glacken.
Hi everyone, Jasmine Ramirez, Senior Community Development Specialist with Self-Help Enterprises. On behalf of Self-Help Enterprises, we'd first and foremost like to thank the State Water Board for hosting this workshop. And from an organizational standpoint, we believe it is critical to address the deficiencies as identified by DWR and the State Water Board within each subbasin. We encourage the State Water Resources Control Board to ensure that each plan's deficiencies have been properly addressed in order to reach groundwater sustainability. Self-Help Enterprises Emergency Services team has been coordinating with the Kern Subbasin since February 2024 to develop a domestic well mitigation program that includes community outreach, domestic well assessment, interim bottled and hauled water, and long water access solutions. In May of this year, Self-Help Enterprises and the Kern Subbasin Groundwater Sustainability Agencies signed a letter of intent for Self-Help Enterprises to administer the well mitigation program and expects to execute a contract and begin service delivery beginning January 2025. While Self-Help Enterprises Emergency Services team is engaged with the Kern Subbasin, Self-Help Enterprises Community Engagement and Planning team, who reviews groundwater sustainability plans and often makes recommendations for them, is not engaged with the Kern Subbasin at this time, and therefore we do not have any input or concerns to provide. Safeguarding drinking water for communities stands as our organizational priority and lies at the core of the work that we do. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Okay, thank you so much. We're going to move on to Mac Glacken and then on to Yu Chen Chow. So Mac, go for it.
Thank you so much, Mia. This is Mac Glacken from Clean Water Action, an associate working on groundwater with the community Lost Hills in Kern. I additionally want to extend my thanks for the diligence of State Water Board staff in holding these workshops and in producing and publishing the draft staff report and the finalized staff report. I want to showcase our concerns on fragmentation in the Kern Subbasin. As it stands now, that fragmentation trickles down to all groundwater management, sustainable management criteria, MTs, MOs in the subbasin set by the GSP. Fragmentation coordination must be addressed within Kern to reach sustainability. In addition, we want to ask State Water Board to provide clear and actionable guidelines on equitable stakeholder engagement in their final draft staff report for the Kern Subbasin. We think that this is something that is critically overlooked in achieving sustainability under SGMA. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. We are going to move on to Yu-Chen Chow.
Thank you, Mia. Good afternoon. This is Yu-Chen Chow. I'm the Risk and Resilience Officer of the California Department of Water Resources State Water Project. The State Water Project team has been regularly interacting with the West Side District Water Authority, the GSA, as they have developed their 2024 revised GSP. Throughout the process, the State Water Project has provided input to inform the agency's groundwater management initiatives and revisions, particularly in response to the concerns raised in the State Water Project's 2022 public comment letter on the 2022 Kern GSA GSP. The State Water Project appreciates the candor, transparency, and collaborative spirit that the agency has demonstrated. Their effort to address State Water Project's needs and concern has been appreciated. As described in the public comment letter, subsidence possess a significant capacity and operational challenges to the aqueduct. The State Water Project remains resolute in its commitment to protect its critical infrastructure as the aqueduct's operational conveyance capacity is essential to the cities and farms throughout the state that depends on it. Safeguarding the aqueduct against subsidence-related impact is a priority for the State Water Project. And also, we acknowledge the complexity of the use of groundwater within the agency's subbasin and commends the agency for its proactive resolution aimed at enhancing the groundwater management practices within its subbasin. Specifically, State Water Project recognized the significance of the following management actions: the well drilling moratorium, zero net wells management action, the well registration management action, the well extraction volume reporting within the buffer zone management action. The State Water Project look forward to continue our collaboration with the agency to protect aqueduct from the future harm while support their effort to revise the GSP and achieve the sustainable groundwater management in accordance with the SGMA. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you very much. I'd like to open the floor to anyone else who would like to share a comment. Okay, hearing none, I'm going to move on from the comment portion. Give me just 1 second. Let's see. Ooh, let's see. Why? All right. Share. There we go. All right. So if you can please choose the proper presentation on the top of your screen again, we will get you to the right spot. Again, if you would like to provide written comments, you have the opportunity to do that via email, mail, or hand delivery. The contact information has been provided in the comments and can also be found on the Kern County webpage. I'd like to thank you all for taking the time to join today's public staff workshop on the Kern County Subbasin. We hope it was informative for you all. Thank you to all of our presenters, both the State Water Board members and the GSA representatives, for all of your continued work. I'd like to invite you all to participate in a post-survey workshop survey. We very much appreciate your feedback. The link to the survey is in the chat. And finally, there will be an in-person workshop this Thursday in Bakersfield, California. You can find more information by viewing the flyer on the website. Thank you all and have a wonderful day.